Between this week and next week, I think I'll be in 6 different states talking about this, and sometimes the audiences are big, and sometimes they're medium, and sometimes it's me and 5 or 6 kids just hanging out. But there was just something that felt a little bit different today, and I think that for me it was knowing that the people who put this together were people who I so respected that actually when Scott and Lenny, Jordan's here representing those guys from PACE, when they called and said they were going to do this, the very first thing I said was, like, I don't want a nickel for this if I get to come out and talk to your community, and especially if I get to be on a panel with Jen and Dr. Smith. I don't know how much people have studied or understand or really look back on the history of our field, but as somebody who's relatively young in it, I'm 39 and I got into this field about 12 years ago. I guess there are just certain names and certain people. Like if, I think I might have said this the first time I met him or sat on a panel with him, but like, if there were trading cards for the treatment industry, he'd be like Babe Ruth. and he's here, but I almost didn't come, like when Jennifer wasn't here, because it was that's a really tough pill to swallow. Because I think that there are a lot of us, myself included, we'll get into my background in just a minute, but myself included, like I think when I go, everybody's gonna be like, well, that guy had it coming. he kind of dodged a bullet for a long time, but I didn't really know a whole lot of people with the same kind of inner beauty as that woman had. So she's really missed. She's really missed. So we're going to talk about weed, and I'm going to do it in a way that hopefully is respectful of all sides of a complex issue, but I absolutely guarantee you that if you came in with super preconceived notions on one side or the other, I will piss you off. So I'm going to only talk for 60, maybe 70 minutes, and then we have a wonderful panel again, Babe Ruth, and then you have a great local resource who can talk to you about what's going on here. But this slide deck, I want to give to all of you guys as well. If there's anybody who could use this in your stuff, you're more than welcome to it. Let's just kind of keep that going with what we did. How about that? And what a pleasure it is to have so many good friends from Muir Woods here. I getting sober young, I got a real soft spot in my heart for a lot of you folks who are giving it the old college try at this age. Listen, I sit on a couple of boards, and I'll brush over some of them, but this one I'm not going to brush over because it's really important that you understand, even at the beginning, kind of the complexities of some of what we do and what we are going to talk about. When I was standing out front, there was a guy came in and he kept trying to pigeonhole the person who was standing there to, hang on, but is this for or is this opposed? Is this good or is this bad? And when I got my dinner tonight and mentioned to the waitress, she said, so you for or you opposed? Are you for or you opposed? I said, oh man, like I am for logic and I'm for sound science. And more than that, I'm for the idea that if we all think a little bit more instead of just kind of react to what we're being spoon-fed, we'd be in a better place. And I think these guys do the same thing. So Project SAM is an interesting thing. They've sort of ended up being the main political opponents of commercialized marijuana, but they didn't start out that way. It's Patrick Kennedy and David Frum and Kevin Sabet. So super left, super right, and a guy who made a career out of being in the middle. He was in 3 White Houses and 2 different parties. He's not party affiliated. So when they started this was what we believed. We believed that we wanted to inform public policy with the science of today's marijuana. And this is something that I so respect and tip my hat to Dr. Smith on, because if there's anybody in the world who can talk to us about the differences between that weed and this weed, it's this guy, because he was there. When people go back and they talk about the Summer of Love or being at Woodstock or being at I say, listen, that's awesome. Like, I'm really glad that you enjoyed that green, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm not talking about the weed that you bumped into in the hay. If we were talking about that, I'm not here right now. I'm at home with my people. We want to have honest conversations about reducing the unintended consequences of current marijuana policies. There still are there any children? Any children who don't have rap sheets? Okay. There still are some dumb-ass laws out there. There still are some laws that penalize people and attach things to them for the rest of their life because they got caught with a little bit of bud. I'm not for that. And I think that one of the things that Sam has done, and one of the things I've been proud to do alongside him, is to advocate for more responsible laws that look a lot less like criminalizing bad decisions and a lot more like trying to help people out who need it and forget about the people who don't. We also set out to prevent the establishment of big marijuana. That we failed miserably at. And I think we probably should think about like changing that tagline because depending on how you do the numbers, so let's just look at what we taxed last year. Nope, this is 2016. We don't have 2017's data yet. In 2016, we taxed about $6.7 billion worth of marijuana. We taxed about $3 billion worth of milk. It's a big, big business. And so I think one of the big issues that a lot of people have here, and where one of the disconnects is we all think that this is kind of mom and pop. We all think that this is kind of grow it in the backyard. We all think that this is feel good, I'm going to do what I want, stay out of my business government. When in reality, like we're talking about a pretty significant business interest, which is what I'm really going to talk to you about because that's what Scott asked me to share. Like, let's talk about the post-industrialization. Lessons learned from. And then here's the other one. Again, if you're the right-wing crowd here who's like, yeah, give them hell, Ben. If you're, sorry, because Sam believes and I also believe that we should be working to promote the medicinal properties inside of this plant. Now, here's the reality, and we'll get to a little bit more of this. I got a chapter in the book that was a really hard chapter to write, but this medical discussion is super complex. And so I'm just going to give you like a little bit of it. And then I've got a slide or two at the end, but here's what I can tell you for sure medicinally, is that there are components inside of this plant, particularly one called CBD. There are components inside of this plant that absolutely are reducing seizures in a pretty rare type of seizure disorder called Dravet syndrome. There are components inside of this plant that are doing amazing things for people with pretty extreme cases of MS and have muscle spasticity issues. There are even real evidence that shows us that this helps out with people suffering from wasting illnesses, particularly those associated with AIDS, HIV, as well as some chemo patients. Now, with that said, you don't smoke medicine, period, ever. Medicine is not combusted and inhaled. Medicine is something that oftentimes is derived from a natural plant. And yeah, I get it. I'm on the other side. Listen, I come from Boulder, Colorado. Like, I get the other side of this thing. We're twice the hippie you guys are out here. And there's some hippies out here. Like, I get it. That means big pharma's got to be involved. All right, well, to some extent, yeah, pharma does kind of have to be involved because you can't smoke a whole plant and say that that's the medicine. The medicine resides inside of it. And we'll talk just a little bit more about that in a minute. So that's what Sam believes, and that's what I believe. Here's a little bit more because someone once told me that it's important to understand where you're coming from if you want to be as unbiased as possible. Anything that I share with you in here that's opinion, I'll certainly tell you that. For the most part, there's very, very little opinion inside of this. It's just science. But this is where I'm coming from. So I'm raising 3 kids in the weed capital of the world. And I'm sorry, Marin, San Fran, Southern California, wherever, we still got you all beat. Like, I know, we were in Northern California for a cannabis summit. I was there with Jen, actually, and I said this. I said, we are still the weed capital of the world, and one of the guys who turned out was a grower in the back said, give us a minute. I said, okay, California might end up being, but right now, Colorado's got you a little bit. So that's where I'm raising my people. I've got a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 14-year-old. I'm also a guy in recovery, and we got some traditions that are very important to us, and so it doesn't matter how I'm affiliated or where I'm affiliated, but I work with a lot of guys in early recovery, and I work with a lot of people trying to get this. It's important for me. It's the only way I stay sober is by giving it back a little bit. So a lot of these guys who I work with, this is a really big thing for them. And even for me, and this is where I'll just be very frank with it. I got sober on June 15th of 1996, a long time ago. And I still wake up a little bit when I smell it. And I smell it more and more and more now. I smell it burning, I smell it drying, and I smell it growing. And it was a big part of what I did. It certainly wasn't all of what I did, but it was a big part of it. And you guys are probably starting to notice it. You have such a robust medical community, I'm sure you are. But it's just around more. And when it's around more, that does a little bit something in the back of the brains of those of us who are trying to live sober. And this is when we get to one of the very first and probably most, at least for me, loudest differences when everybody says the same as alcohol, it's the same as alcohol. If Dr. Smith was having a beer right now in the first row, I wouldn't smell it. If he was having a beer, we'd have problems. But if he was having a beer, I wouldn't, and it wouldn't be making its way into my brain. I went out to set the Easter eggs up 2 weeks ago in my backyard, and I live in a really nice neighborhood. I'm trying to give my kids a real different upbringing than the one that I had. And when I went out back, some neighbor, I don't know who, was smoking. And as I'm setting the Easter eggs up, like, it just gets you going a little bit. And so that's something that I ask people to be aware of, again, especially if you're on the exact opposite end of this issue. You think weed's the greatest thing in the world, it's going to solve every problem that we've ever dealt with. Would you guys just remember that there's a lot of us out there living in recovery, and you are so courteous and kind most of the time when you sit with us at dinner and you say, would it bug you if I had a drink? And some days we say, no, not at all. And some days we say, yeah, would you not tonight? The same thing exists for those of us in states with legal weed, because when you burn it, you can smell it for a ways away. Other affiliations I sit on the board of directors for an organization called NowGap, which is the National Association of Lesbian, Gay, Transgender, Bisexual Treatment Providers and their allies. And they do wonderful work. You should look into what they do. NMI is part of ONDCP, who worked with Jennifer and flew her out, and I work for them also. I'm also a fellow at the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida, which is something for a guy who barely made it out of high school. And I'd planned on sharing a little bit now, and I don't think that we have too much. Thank you for these, Dean. I was struck by that picture because most of the time when people talk, except for Dr. Smith, I don't give a crap. I'm like playing on my phone, or I'm like trying. But when that woman talked, I shut up and I listened, and I loved that because that was just us listening. Yeah. And there's the three of us at a really beautiful moment in Seattle. Every time I give a talk, I either start it or stop it because people were foolish enough to give me the microphone by asking if we can take a moment to remember the people out there who are still suffering. Because again, regardless of how you feel about the politics of this, man, this country's in a crisis. And there's a lot of people hurting. And so I'm going to jump into it, and I'm sorry you are going to be drinking through a fire hose because I crammed a bunch in here, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for our panel. But before I do, we're just going to take a moment for two reasons. We are going to remember those who are still suffering from this illness out there. And for those of us who knew Jen, we're going to take a minute to remember what a beautiful light she was and how many lives she healed and saved. Can we just take a minute? Here's what we're going to cover. Who cares? I'm going to cover it anyway, so I'm going to skip it. Take a picture if you want this, but know that this slide deck is yours. Do anything that you want to with this information. I am very, very often asked where people should start researching. And my answer to where they should start researching is right here. It's simple. And I want you to remember this, that there's nothing subjective about genuine scientific findings when they are real. I hear all the time, man, the jury's still out on that. Nobody knows the answer to this, and we don't have enough data. And because it's Schedule 1, we haven't studied. And we actually know quite a bit about weed. And not all of it's come from this country. Thankfully, there's a group of dedicated people in Israel and Europe who've been looking at this for a long time. But what we know comes from peer-reviewed and journal-published studies. You with me? Anything else is some dude's opinion. So when we read stuff and when you see stuff and when you look at it, do two things. You always give it a minute to breathe. I get called all the time, I get a lot of media phone calls and things, and a lot of them, they want me to comment right away on a study that just came out that day. And I think, man, okay, not only do I need a few minutes to try and understand this, I need to talk to somebody much smarter than I am about the methodology and what's really going on. And then we need to give it a minute to breathe to see if it actually stands up. So here are a couple that have had a minute to breathe and that are absolutely phenomenal resources that I'd direct you towards if you're interested in this. And much of what I cite is in these. So 2014, Wayne Hall, The Adverse Health Effects of Cannabis, Recreational Cannabis. So that's most things physical. When you have questions about how it interacts with the body, Pat, will you give me water? When you have questions about how it interacts with the body, thanks, man, that's a good place to start. In 2014, Dr. Volkov, who's the head of NIDA, the National Institute for Drug Abuse, she published a meta-study. So that is a meta-study is basically a summary of all of the sound real science. And then she published it in the New England Journal of Medicine. So here, for people who want to make sure that the science is pedigree, this is the nation's top doctor on these issues publishing in the New England Journal of Medicine a meta-study, a summary of all things. This one is sound and a great place to go to. Colorado Health Institute's Legal Marijuana Coming into Focus is a really nice data set that we have. And then if we have time at the end of it, I'm going to talk to you about probably one of the most important scientific findings of the last 15 years when it comes to this. And if I don't get to it, please look into this. The title of it is The Effects of High Potency Cannabis on Psychosis. And then the Rocky Mountain Hyder Report and Marijuana in Colorado, the Impact. These have asterisks because they are not science. They are data. So I just told you to demand peer review. This isn't a scientific finding. This is empirical data. Okay? So there's that. Here's what you got to do, man. And what you got to do for the next 40 minutes, maybe 35, whatever it is that I'm talking, is I got to ask you to do something that's really difficult if you're over 25. If you're under 25, this ain't going to be hard at all. But if you're over 25, I got to ask you to do something really hard. And that is to move away from the construct that you have of what weed is. Because when I say weed, or when somebody says weed to me, the thing that I think of is the cover of the Dre album, The Chronic. And some of you guys don't know, he actually used to be a rapper, right? Before he would, or I think of the Cypress Hill album, Legalize at the bottom. I had a Cypress Hill shirt that said Legalize it. Like, I think of a green leafy plant. And I got to ask you to step back from that for a minute and give me a few minutes to explain to you why, if that is your construct of what cannabis is, it's antiquated. If all of that just went over your head and you're like, what the hell is he talking? Then forget it. Pick back up in about 10 minutes. But for those of you who you're like, yeah, it's a plant. It's a plant. This is the new school cannabis. It's not what you smoked in the 70s. And so long as we continue to have conversations with people who are consuming about what we smoked in the 70s, about what Dr. Smith was dealing with in the Summer of Love back here, and if we keep doing that, we're ships passing in the night, man. And it's the same reason why I feel like we have a lot of the trouble that we do with the opioid crisis right now is we're trying to simplify it down to this, and we're trying to put our understanding, well, when my doctor prescribed me this, I did that. You're missing it. They're going here and we're going here. So step away from the idea of what you think weed is and know that what it is today in a post-industrialized commercial market. I'm not talking about a flowering plant. I'm talking about THC. THC, a little oversimplified, but it'll hold true. THC is the part of the plant that gets you high. The more THC you can get in, the higher you can get. We have moved into a commercialized market for THC. And I love this because it's honest. It's not Nature's Healing, whatever, or Doctor, whoever. They're just like, look, man, we sell THC. And I don't know if any of you guys saw that movie. It was a really great movie called Thank You for Smoking. And there's one point where the protagonist is having a conversation with an executive from a cigarette company. And he says to him, he says, we don't sell cigarettes. We sell nicotine delivery systems. Let's move away from this idea of cannabis, of weed, of a plant, because really, if that's what it is to you, I'm not talking to you. And let's move more towards an understanding of what's being sold today are THC delivery products. Here's what THC is and why THC matters. Before you light the plant on fire, 240-ish chemicals inside of it. After you light it on fire, 500 and some chemicals inside of it. Two of these chemicals matter way, 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 way more than the other ones. They are CBD. Remember I mentioned that at the beginning where we find our medicine? Antipsychotic, anticonvulsant, actually anti-inflammatory, really pretty remarkable part of this plant. And then THC, the psychoactive component, the part of the plant that gets you high. So the world has this beautiful data set from University of Mississippi who collected, this is a perfect data set. They collected it in the same way with the same machines, the same people for 50 years, a representative sample of all of the weed in the country. So weed from here, weed from the Golden Triangle, weed from Colorado, and ditch weed from the mountains in North Carolina. This is the average of all of that. So if you see here, the first thing that we learn from this chart, and something that is so incredibly important, it's hard to overstate how important this is and how relevant this is in many of our conversations. What we see here, first of all, is what is naturally occurring inside of weed. And there, of course, are people who've spiked it. You could get much stronger stuff in Indonesia 100 years ago, but it still was nowhere near this. What naturally occurs inside of this plant is under 0.5% of THC. That's what grows. That's what God made. That's the natural plant. So when I hear this, and it seems like I hear it more from young people and lawyers. When I hear from young people, it's, hey man, it's natural, it's natural, and I'm with you. Like, this is natural. What's natural is less than 0.5% THC, and what's interesting, see, we didn't even start to care about CBD until the mid-'80s because we didn't think there could be anything good inside of this. This is war on drug insanity stuff. But what we find here is that naturally occurring also is about a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD. So remember when I told you that THC is the part that gets you high, and the more THC, the higher you get? Yeah, that's true. But what it really is it's the delta between the two. CBD counteracts the psychoactive components of THC. So if you are able to keep that at about a 1-to-1 ratio, you're really not going to get high. And it's going to have cool medicinal properties. And it's going to be a much, much more interesting substance. But the problem is, it keeps you from getting high. So while there were absolutely the people who loved and believed in this for years and were finding things that were closer to the norm, look what we did as a nation over 50 years. And this is really simple, man. What we did was we became better gardeners. Like, we got good at seed exchanges, at selectively breeding a little bit of a stronger plant, then a little bit of a stronger plant, then a little bit of a stronger plant, and then, oh my goodness, we found hydroponic, and we found asexual, we found cloning, we found inverted hydroponic. We found ways to make our weed better and better and better and better, if you wanted to get high, which, of course, that's what we do. There is a market for medical. I gave a TED Talk about this recently, and one of the things I talked about is the difference between the market for recreational and the market for medical. There is a market for medical, but it's not a $1 billion thing. There's a real market for recreational. We like to get high. Okay, so this is when it gets a little bit shocking. And this is when I'm going to make a big giant statement. And I know where I am geographically. And I know you guys know your weed out here. But let me make a huge statement and then show you how that's true with the next slide here. Unless you have purchased and consumed THC from a commercial dispensary in the last 5 years, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm guessing there's some of you guys in here, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but some of you guys in here who have history similar to mine, you'd be like, don't know weed? Like, hell, I don't know weed. I know every freaking thing there is to know about weed. I was giving a talk to a professional sports league recently, and one of the lawyers, actually, it's a direct quote, one of the lawyers came up to me and he said, direct quote, boy, you can't teach me shit about weed. And at the end of this, he came up and apologized, and he said, sorry for cussing so much, I was wrong. Unless you've purchased and consumed in the last 5 years from a commercial dispensary, you don't know what you're talking about. Here's the why. 50 years. This is 50 years. And these are increments of 2. This is sound gardening. 6 years. Increments of 5. This is good chemistry. And there's a really big difference, man. There's a difference between somebody growing some bud in their backyard and somebody who's growing this to sell it commercially. Here are these slides put together. It looked funny. The blue is Colorado. The purple marks the high point that we've ever gotten for CBD. There's somebody who's gotten a little over 15% CBD in it, but here it is together. You see why this conversation is so important today, and why having conversations about years past, again, I get it. I get that there's a lot of history here, and some of this stuff absolutely, we got to air it and we got to talk about it, but I'm not the one to do it. Like when people want to talk about what was happening back here, and even before, how even why some of these drug laws came into effect. Like, you were going to have a very difficult time ever convincing me that laws around marijuana didn't come into effect so that people could oppress brown and black communities. You're going to have a hard time convincing me of that. But to talk about that, to talk about the 30s and the 60s and the 70s, is to not talk about this. And while this conversation has a place because we have to learn from it and we have to make better policies based on the knowledge that we have gained from the dumb ways that we did things before, that is not what they were smoking at jazz clubs in the 30s. And so it's really important that we be talking about what people are consuming today. Back to today's marijuana. This is a great ad. 6 strains over 30% and all our concentrates above 90%. So here's something that's kind of shocking. And I think this will be sort of the last sciencey thing that I share with you. That one of the first questions that I get asked at almost every interview that I do is, Ben, do you really believe that marijuana is addictive? And I love to answer that question by, so typically what I'll say is something to the effect of, I believe marijuana is addictive in the same way that I believe if I go 50 miles to the west, I'm going to be very wet. Like, this isn't my opinion. I'm not sharing with you an opinion. I'm sharing with you objective diagnostic criteria. You can't walk around, somebody with an MD behind their name, somebody who is billing insurance companies, somebody who has the trust of us collectively, can't walk around, take a look at your playlist, or look at the shoes you're wearing, or the outfit you've got on, and be like, drug addict. How many times have you seen Fast Times at Ridgemont? Drug addict. Oh, Cypress Hill, drug addict. No. You have to meet objective diagnostic criteria. And the way it works with substance use disorder, and cannabis is just like any other one. Cannabis use disorder is the same thing. If you check the boxes, somebody has it or they don't have it. So if somebody checks if somebody checks 2 of those boxes, there's 11 of them. If they check 2 of them, they've got a cannabis use disorder that's categorized as mild. If they check 3 or 4 of them, They have a cannabis use disorder, no, 4 or 5 of them, that's categorized as moderate. If they check 6 or above, am I right, clinicians here? 6 and above, you have a cannabis use disorder that's classified as severe. So you use objective diagnostic criteria to determine whether or not somebody is an addict. In the same way, we use objective diagnostic criteria. For the first time ever, we are doing this, because the latest version of the DSM, which is the manual that doctors and clinicians use to diagnose things out of, gave us the diagnostic criteria for cannabis withdrawal. I think that if Dr. Smith and I spoke together at ASAM last year, and I think that if we would have gone into ASAM even 10 years ago and said cannabis withdrawal, we'd have been laughed out of that place. Because you still, this is the narrative, and this is what you hear. You can't get physically addicted to weed. You know what the truth of that is? The truth of that is you couldn't get physically addicted to weed. Back then. You don't get diagnostic criteria and the ability to bill an insurance company unless it is a very, very, very real thing. The fact that we now can diagnose and have to treat people who are physically dependent on is a pretty significant game changer. One of my sponsees right now is in the middle of a pretty intense withdrawal. So here's the economics, and this is why it matters, and this is what I really came to talk about. The whys. The whys. Like, I got plenty of friends who can do this and who do this in moderation. Just like I got friends who can drink in moderation. My wife is somebody who can drink in moderation. She's never tried a drug in her life. And she'll have 2 or 3 margaritas a year. My wife is worth nothing to the alcohol industry. She's not even a blip on their screen, man. You know who they liked? Who they needed? They needed the guy who was drinking Mad Dog 2020 at 12 years old. I was the base. I was the money. There's an 80-20 rule inside of the consumption of substances like this, and that's that 80% of the product is consumed by 20% of the consumers. And that data is held very true in Colorado. And here is why that matters. Again, even if weed's the greatest thing, it's going to save the world and it's going to fix everything from hangnails to hangovers, so even if that, you need to consider the economics of this. In Colorado, if you add up all the McDonald's and Starbucks put together, we got twice as many dispensaries. And the only reason why that matters, and why we'll see what happens in California. You guys went a little bit crazy with your legislation. You see how Washington was much more deliberate with the way that they allowed retail, but they also just drink too much freaking coffee there. But the reason why this matters is Econ 101. Is that to have this much retail, this is by any stretch of the imagination market saturation. Because there's a lot of McDonald's and a lot of Starbucks out there. This is market saturation. And the reason why this matters, and we have to consider this when we're thinking about how we feel about this particular thing, is simply this, that if you have that many dispensaries, if you have that many people who are selling the same thing, they cannot continue to compete for the same pie. That slice has got to get bigger. And how does it get bigger? How do we get more users? It's simple. We capture new users and we convert current users to more frequent users. And we need that 20%. Again, that 80%, the people who come out to Colorado and I bought an edible and went skiing. And okay, well, stop skiing stoned because you piss me off anyway. But fine, have a freaking edible, 50-year-old whoever, and sit in your hotel room and relive the glory days. You don't matter to me, and you sure as hell don't matter to the Marijuana Policy Project, the Drug Policy Alliance, the Marijuana Industry Association, the Cannabis Growers Association. You don't matter to them because there ain't no money in it. Because my wife, with her couple margaritas a year. You capture new users and you convert current users to more frequent users, and here is the formula. This is it. This is how you create a problemed user. We can write the script for you. If you want to go from somebody who is just using every now and again and is not a thing and is not getting in the way of their life, we know people like that. Or if you want to put them, get them to a place like where I was and where a lot of people are who I know and I love, and where it really is a big issue for them, this is the equation. Age of onset, frequency of use, and potency. That's how we create the problemed user. Age of onset, frequency of use, and potency. And guess what? This isn't specific to weed at all. If I want you to become a problemed user, these are the things that I introduce. I get you to use early, I get you to use often, and I get you to use the strong stuff. So let's take a look at a post-industrialized Colorado real quick. And actually, I think I'm going to get through concentrates, and then we're going to stop, and I'll leave all the science with you. If you want the science, there's a ton of it here. People like Jen were better at that than I was anyway. Age of onset, frequency of use, and potency. That is Cookie Monster on the side of a dispensary with a plate full of weed. Spuds McKenzie, nothing. Some of y'all don't even remember him. Joe Camel, nothing. And you know what? These guys are not going to sell weed to a 6-year-old who walks in. But this is long-term hearts and minds stuff, man. This dispensary actually got a cease and desist from Sesame Street. Listen, as someone in recovery, one of the things that we every night we do something called a 10-step, and we sit down and we're like, how did I screw up? How can I do it better? And one of the things that I want to really try to not screw up is judging people. I want to try and love everybody in the same way that God loves me, and I want to just be there with you, and we're all doing the best we can kind of thing. And I really try not to judge people, but I still have a hard time getting past this. If you sell drugs for a living and you get a cease and desist from Sesame Street, like, you need to ask yourself some hard questions. like you need to go home and sit down with your partner and be like, so, sweetie, are we really on the right track in life here? Age of onset. It's a kids-only fishing program in my town. It's only available to those 15 and younger, and last year during the winter, that's taken from the parking lot with no Zoom or anything. A dispensary opened directly across the street. You see what's on either side of it is absolutely nothing. Nothing. The only thing this is proximity to for a quarter mile this way and a half mile this way is the kids-only fishing program. And I loved the sign because it doesn't face the road, it faces my community bike path. My community has a great story when it comes to the opt-out, and you guys will learn more about opting out. Colorado when we first passed, about 84% of the state opted out. We're just above 50% now. I think it's like 51%, because you got to remember that you have to win every single challenge as a community, and you only have to lose it once. And my town actually voted against allowing for recreational 3 times. 3 times we said no recreational in town. And then in November, there was a closed-door session where the legislature voted 3-3, and the mayor cast a deciding vote 4, and now we have 4 retail stores. So it can happen anyway, and you gotta keep in mind, like, we gotta get more dispensaries in there if people are gonna keep making more and more and more money. You gotta remember the economics of this thing. Age of onset. This was my daughter is going to high school next year, which is terrifying. And she's terming out of her little school. And so they gave all of the kids in 8th grade the high school guide for next year so we could see when open houses are and all that kind of thing. And she came home with it. She went down to her room and she came up 15 minutes later, and that was the first page of it. There's a half-page ad for a weed dispensary. And she said, Dad, first I thought it was for Starbucks, but then I realized I was like, oh, sweet marketing move. Like, marketing win number 1 and number 2 associated with a product they know, put it right freaking in front of them. Again, Starbuds, who offered me a job, is not going to sell weed to my 14-year-old daughter. She can't walk in and do it. But it's branding, man. It's long-term branding. It's good business right here. Santa Claus with a bag full of dope. How about this one? Smoke weed every day. These guys own 16 dispensaries. Listen, I was in Atlanta last week at the RX Summit, and it tends to be a pretty conservative crowd in law enforcement, and I just got chewed out left and right for being way too liberal on this and like saying things in my book that pissed off people who were like serious drug warriors, and you know some of them are. And I catch a lot of heat for being too liberal sometimes, which is crazy, I know, out here. But let me tell you this: for all of my trying to be center on this issue, I can tell you very assuredly, don't smoke weed every day. I don't care who you are. Don't do it. It changes the physical makeup of one's brain. Gray matter, white matter, connective tissue. Don't smoke weed every day. And the real reasons, the youth, I'm going to tell you that, the reason why the young is so important, and especially some of you young men back here, listen, I want you to hear this thing, because a lot of us come back to the natural and a lot of us come back to the whatever. And until you're about 26, 27 years old, your brain is not fully myelinated. Your frontal lobe is not developed. And what that means is it means that basically in life, we have a great big giant gas pedal and a little tiny brake pedal. It's biology, man. It's like sex, 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 risk, 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 sex, 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 sex. We don't really get a chance to pump the brakes too much. And when your frontal lobe is fully developed, we start to have that ability. And then when it's fully myelinated, that's like the difference there is a cell phone without a case on it, or a cell phone with a case on it. And once your brain's protected, myelinated, if you drop that thing, okay, like we probably shouldn't be dropping our cell phones, but it's gonna be all right. God bless OtterBox. But if you don't have a case on it, you gotta be much, much more careful with that. So don't do it every day. Do not do it every day, because it changes physical structure stuff. And everybody needs to stay away from this until their brain is frontal lobe's fully developed, which is 26, 27 for boys, 24-ish for girls-ish, earlier. That's a back-to-school special. The half-naked chick. That says a lot, man. Look, that top one's 20% off with your student ID. And there's a cartoon, and there's Fred Flintstone smoking a dab. Sign twirler on the 16th Street Mall. That came in the value pack to my house. These guys set a DJ up at their thing, and this is where I live. This is where I'm raising my kids. And it makes it difficult when I have that conversation. I'm like, listen, man, like maybe you shouldn't smoke the strong stuff. Maybe because I've moved much more into a harm reduction mode of dealing with people in my community now. Or maybe you just need to wait until you're a little bit older. This isn't for kids. Like, whatever, old man. Like the teddy bear riding the roster rocket over the Flatiron says I should stay high. I'm like, oh, you freaking got me there. So let me give you a couple things to keep you up at night if you're not aware of a lot of this. If you are aware of a lot of this, let me validate that I actually pay attention and I'm not as old as some of my vernacular might make me feel like. We're going to talk about concentrates, very quickly edibles, vaporizing, and then we're going to our panel. So first, concentrates. You guys, I say this word, concentrates, BHO, dabbing would be the verb of concentrate consumption. When I say concentrates, who understands me? Freaking California. Good. For those of you who don't, we call it weed crack in Colorado, and I love this review. It says, crack is whack, crack kills, say no to crack. Sound familiar? Well, kids, I'm here to tell you that not all crack is bad. Some crack is actually really, really good. So we're talking about green crack. We're talking about THC that's mid to upper 90% pure. So remember we talked about what we started out with, less than 0.5%. And we're not going to get to it right now, so here's your quick spoiler alert. One of the things that made that Lancet study so incredibly compelling was that Lancet study was and is the highest concentration of THC that we have ever studied. We don't have sound science on anything higher than what that Lancet study showed us, and that Lancet study was 16% THC. So all these data that we have, everything that we tell you about addiction rates and psychosis and suicidal tendencies and some of the scary stuff that we know maxes out at 16%. You know how much we know about a 95% THC product? There's some studies taking place right now, but real science takes time. And science around cannabis, around THC, absolutely has to be longitudinal. That means it takes a minute because it doesn't interact with us the same way that meth does and cocaine does and things like that. Essentially, the more of the liquid that you use to extract the THC that you're able to purge from the product, the stronger it can be. So on this example, and I'll show you some more, your shatter down here is the highest form. And that stuff's lighter. I mean, that's probably like, I don't know, that's definitely not in the 90s. It's thick and it's big. This stuff here, I'm going to skip over some of this, but I want you to hear the messaging from the retailer with this, especially those of you who work in prevention or who work with young people. I want you to hear this messaging. If you can't read it, it's the first one. It says, more is not better. Cannabis concentrates are potent. Start by consuming a small dose, about half the size of a pinhead or less. Like, brother, gone are the days when the spliff and the car was this big and Cheech and Chong were rolling down the highway. Gone are the days. Now we have a product where they say half the size of a pinhead, which to me is kind of funny. Like, I love thinking about somebody cutting off half the size of a pinhead because you know what? Nobody does, ever. Like, you don't. So when we think about weed, we might think about buds. That was, man, again, mid-90s, and I was in Washington, D.C., so we have pretty sound market. When you got your bag, you wanted to see as much of that as you possibly could. The rest, the seed, the shake, the stems, stuff that pop and blow out of your pipe when you smoked it, and you wanted to see less of that and more of this. Now, when we say flower, this is all we see. It's why you see in dispensaries, they use chopsticks a lot of times to pull them out. It's kind of showing the consumer that you're not getting anything but bud, the good stuff. That's weed, right? Like, so is this. Like, this is weed. Butter, this is weed. It's concentrated THC that use butane to extract the THC from the plant, but that's weed. And that's weed. And that's weed. And so for those of us who, when I said at the beginning that you got abandon the construct and you were like, okay, it's a plant, it's a plant, it's a plant, like, that's weed. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner I think we can start to have more relevant conversations with what people are and talking to them about what they're consuming today in a way that's actually going to matter to them. Because legally in the state of California and legally in Colorado, that's weed. Your definition specifically calls that out in Prop 6.4. In mine, it's even better because it's in our state constitution. We amended our state constitution and added this to it. So our state constitution includes a definition of cannabis as a result, derivative, extract of, byproduct, concentrate. That's weed, man. So is that. I'm granted, that's probably like $40,000 worth of weed, but that's weed. Like, never thought you'd see the day, did you, Dr. Smith? Yet we still have this narrative that persists. And this persistent narrative is, are you going back to nature? Don't forget the natural cannabis. We are your concentrate headquarters. That's not natural cannabis. Period. And when we are told that by people who are either consuming or selling, it's time to confront that idea. And when you confront it, personally, when I confront it with the people who are selling, I do it very differently than I do with the people who are consuming, because remember, to them, this is all there ever was. A lot of these young folks who we're working with now, man, they have grown up in a world where there has always been legal weed, medicinal or now otherwise. So when you have this conversation with them, like, wear kid gloves, because you can't yell too hard or you'll push them away. So here's how you consume a concentrate. You either get a commercial dab rig. You want it to be like 700 degrees is optimal for vaporizing this stuff. So you can get them on Amazon. There's your e-nail aromatherapy kit, or a glass that you can plug in and it heats it up to that. It's hot knifing. The concept is hot knifing, and I definitely will not ask for a show of hands here, but like, I don't know, like, back in Washington, when we would consume things that were in rock form and you didn't have anything to consume it with, you would literally stick a knife into a stove, like an electric stove, until it got red hot. You'd hold it, you drop the rock on it, and you would just inhale it. It's the same concept. It's hot knifing. It's a hot nail, or you use a glass pipe. They can, of course, be combusted inside of vaporizers also. That's weed. I loved this because I found an ad just last week in a weekly newspaper where they were advertising all their products that were on sale, and there's not one flower in there. There's all of this other stuff, but there's not a single flower. Listen, 710, stop saying 420 because you sound old and they're laughing at you when you walk away. Say 710 and they'll be like, oh, damn, need to be careful around that guy. 710's oil upside down. So instead of April 20th, think about July 10th. And sorry, I just told your parents on all of you. Here's what, not 21, come in for Waxy Wednesday and Shatter Day. This is an ad specifically selling concentrates and specifically targeting those under 21. And we all know that Snoop Dogg sells some weed. Snoop sells concentrates, because Snoop's a smart man. Willie sells weed. And if Willie Nelson moves you to buy weed, good on you. If he moves you, it's a little different for me. So forgetting the rest of this is just very interesting stuff. These are all pictures I took around Colorado of people offering free dabs. So, of course, dab would be the verb of concentrate consumption. We are not, people don't give things away altruistically. They give them away for a reason. And I knew other guys who used to do this. I got to give you just a little bit of edibles, and then we're going to go to this. Here's the Cliff's Notes. This is all you need to know. Infused everything. These cannabis products might surprise you, particularly for if there's law enforcement or anybody who works inside of the counseling world or anything like this. This is what you need to know, that if it can be introduced into the human body, it is being commercially produced with THC in it. And I have yet to have anybody show me other than this. I was doing an interview talking about this. I was doing an interview with NPR, and the lady said to me, she's like, okay, well, I get it, Ben, but it's not like there's weed spaghetti. And while we're doing it, I'm on my phone, and I sent her a advertisement for THC-infused noodles and a coupon for THC-infused pasta sauce. I was like, it's totally weed spaghetti, and it's on sale this week if you want to get into some weed spaghetti. But you got to understand that anything that can be introduced into the human body is being commercially produced with THC. And it can be really easily consumed around, in front of, no smell, no anything. Weed beer, weed lemonade. Here, look at all these condiments. These are great. Remembering, of course, that here as well, 10 milligrams is a legal serving. So things like this come with a little warning down at the bottom that says only drink 1/10 of this lemonade, or that ketchup you're only supposed to drink 1/5 of. There's cannabis gum. There's caffeine and THC-infused granola bars. There's THC ice cream and coffees. And this was one, I have an app called Weed Maps that sends me notifications when I get near one. And I was actually in California when I got this one. I got a notification that came up on my deal. Remember, 10 milligrams is a legal serving. That's a graham cracker size deal that's got 1,000 milligrams of THC in it. Like that sort of thing's a big deal. So again, we don't have time to get into all of this, but really, really be careful consuming that much, especially eating, because it interacts with you very differently, and there's no treatment for it. Antipsychotics. We can deliver antipsychotics for the acute. You can hydrate, but you got to wait it out. There's our March Madness bracket here. This is a fun one to put into YouTube tonight. Keef Cola with 350 milligrams of THC in it. And your spoiler alert is none of the young people drinking it on YouTube are drinking 1/35th at a time and waiting 40 minutes to see what happens. The question that you get, right, when you see somebody putting 35 legal servings into a chocolate bar, at least the question that I get more often than not is, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. Why would anybody do that? Because you're just going to... Maureen Dowd wrote a great piece in the New York Times after she came to Colorado and ate too much of an edible called Don't Harsh My Mellow, and there's so many stories about people who eat edibles and really tragic things happen, right? Lots of these stories. So people say, hey, that doesn't make a lick of sense. You're just giving extreme examples of this. Why would anybody actually do that? No one would enjoy it. No one responsible would enjoy that. The 80% would not enjoy that. That's where we got to shift, and we got to remember that this is about making the money off the 20%. And that's why this matters. Here's mints, here's caramels and hot chocolate. Yes, they did. They made weed pop rocks. They did. With 100 milligrams in it each. And there was the one my son brought home from school the next day. Cookies and candy bars and Swedish fish and liquid cotton candy. I love that. 5-hour energy suckers. And here, this is great. There's a THC-infused breath spray, and if that's really awesome, and if it works for you, there's a THC-infused lube. And listen, here's a word to the wise for those of you out there. I'm not a doctor, but if you're going to spray something down there, you should get it. Make sure that it's approved by the FDA first, as this said. And here's the THC suppositories. I bought them. Somebody was filming a documentary and followed me around for a while, and she couldn't believe that I could use my credit card in the dispensary. I bought a lot of THC, and I've only ever used my credit card. And so I went in and I bought THC coffee, THC candy bar, and THC suppositories. 60 milligrams each. Again, so people will say, why? That doesn't make any sense. Why? Well, I'll tell you exactly why, because when I went to your outpatient groups before, when I was mandated to, I loved to go high and convince you that I was tired. Like, if I could be sipping a weed soda in front of you, I would. So how about if we end with this and get into it? And again, I'm sorry that I'm skipping quite a bit, but we're such great knowledge here that I want to make sure we have plenty of time. This is an ad for Chiba Chews, who makes something called a decadose. There's 120 milligrams inside of that Jolly Rancher. And this ad says, choose wisely. Do you want sour apple, strawberry, or chocolate? And I kind of would like to reframe that a little bit and like choose wisely. And don't put 120 milligrams of activated delta-9 THC into your body at once. So again, for those of you who want this, we are skipping over vaporizing, which is really fun to talk about. Look, weed-specific vaporizers. That's a weed-specific vaporizer. That one's beautiful. Look, you can inhale and exhale concentrate straight into the cup. That's an actual functioning pen. There's an inhaler. And we're skipping over psychosis, which is so awesome, but you have one of the most brilliant people in the country who can tell you about that, and Dr. Smith. Here are all my references. Here's a copy of the book if anybody wants it. And again, these slides are yours if you're interested in them. So are you guys okay with it? I'd like to kind of call it and open it up to the panel, and you can ask a million questions. Know that there's a lot on the mental health side that we are skipping, but research it. Understand it. Go to those places that I did, and just know this. Here will be the thing that I'll leave you with, again, because they give me the microphone. That this is something that's kind of the drug of the day. And opioids are getting a lot of talk today, and a lot of, but I'm somebody who's active use. I was a daily user for about 4 years. And I've been clean and sober for 21 of them. 21 after that. And I know a lot more about recovery than I do about getting high. And one of the things that I know about recovery is that it's resilient. And it is, it's like water. Man, it'll find a way. And so we can get so hung up on the addiction and so hung up on the people who are drinking too much, people who are using too much, everybody's just getting high and this world's going to hell. And okay. But recovery is possible. And for those people who do, the 20% out there, the people who do have the issue with this stuff, could I just kind of encourage you to keep poking and keep asking questions? Because for some of us, we don't get to just do things recreationally and every now and again. And with that in mind, this side of things is pretty beautiful. And it's something that I wouldn't trade for the world. So let's go to our panel. I thank you guys very, very much.
Thanks, Ben, for another very informative lecture. I've heard Ben speak several times, and I always take lots of notes. The same way with that picture that you saw that Dina took with Jennifer speaking, I had my head down taking notes. So these are really outstanding and very informative speakers. And one of my greatest experiences was being on a panel when I first came to California with Ben and Jennifer. And if you recall, Jennifer was the big hit. That's who everybody wanted to talk with her. We have a lot of talent in the audience. I see a lot of friends here from Muir Wood, Shonda Rankin, Scott Sold, Dina Inberg. What I'm going to do is highlight issues that relates to Ben's talk, filling in some of the specific neuroscience issues. I just came from the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and they had a whole issue on the neuroscience of cannabis and the developing brain, and that very much fits into some of the highlights that Ben talked about. They presented a model of primary prevention, which is the issue with commercialization. Remember, I came out of the summer of love. I was around when they were smoking 2% at a Grateful Dead concert. We treated all the adverse reactions, but that was just weed. And sometimes what happens if you've been researching this area for a very long time, as have I, we said, we're a prisoner of the past. I'm at the bottom of the curve. And really, the concentrates and the potent forms of marijuana have really caught me by surprise. Back when we were treating thousands of young people, I never in a million years thought about commercialization. Never. So one of the most shocking things in terms of what is called primary prevention is the commercialization of cannabis, something we would have never predicted. And fill in the gaps, there's some very alarming things that will pull out of Ben's talk. Example, there was a lot of publicity about the former Speaker of the House coming out in favor of in effect, the legalization of marijuana. They also, and he just signed up with something called Acres in Cannabis. Gee, to Northern California, does that sound great? Except they found out he's a heavy cigarette smoker and he's deeply backed by the tobacco industry. That just came out. So the idea that this is all progressive, there's a growing body of evidence that big tobacco is behind it. And I really want to highlight what you said, Ben. There's a t-shirt in the Hate called, "Even if you're paranoid, the bastards may be out to get you." So the idea that money and big tobacco is out there, there's a growing body of evidence to support that. In other words, it's money that is commercializing. So what we get confused in this seminar that they presented, the difference between commercialization and regulation and decriminalization. Even there's been a shift on the part of the federal government. They don't want to put young people in jail. They want them to get treatment, they want prevention, but they don't want to put them in jail, which is very interesting. Remember, I came out of the reefer madness, war on drugs era. That's not their policy. The biggest concern is the commercialization, and I really want to highlight what Ben said. He, of course, is the expert, and I'm always looking. The one I like that you missed this time, that I'm one dab short of a full bingo card. Anytime you hear Ben speak, you're furiously taking notes about things you remember and quote. But they have demonstrated exactly what he said. They've used the model of tobacco. Start young, have frequency in years, and you have a lifetime customer. That's the tobacco model. One of the reasons the marketers have come up with all of these fancy symbols and the normalize and the sexy principles is very specifically start young, get them to use frequently, and get them to use the more potent forms. That's how you get a lifetime customer. It's a very targeting marketing campaign. Now, when we, I love Muirwood. I'm so happy the young people that are here and getting help, but they do not realize that they have been specifically targeted by a large commercial enterprise. I want to repeat that because this came up at our American Society of Addiction Medicine. Start early, have frequency of use, and produce the most potent forms, and you got a lifetime customer. That's what they're after. Because as Ben pointed out, it's a lifetime customer that is where most of the profit is. It's also, that is where most of the consequences are coming from. The other area that I want to highlight, and parallel with that, was a really fascinating presentation on the developing therapeutic aspects of CBD. I really liked that slide, Ben, where you showed the THC this way and the CBD this way. For those of you that don't know, in the brain there's CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. CB1 is what THC interacts with. CB2 is what CBD, cannabidiol, interacts with, and there's more cannabidiol, or more CB2 receptors outside the brain than in the brain. There's some really interesting studies indicating that CBT for cannabidiol for chronic pain is not only therapeutically beneficial, but also has decreased the incidence of opiate overdoses, because you're starting to see a group of older people take CBD for chronic pain as an alternative to opiates. They call that a side policy analysis of what's happening in Colorado. Colorado, they gave everybody everything and then tried to figure out what happened. And it turns out if you flood a large-scale population with these products, there will be very interesting side benefits. One of the things is older people should not smoke this powerful stuff. There's a thing called hyperemesis, and they're finding lots of people puking their guts out coming into the ER in Colorado because they're not used to it. The part that fits into Ben's talk, I think that's so relevant, is some data that came out from the National Institute of Drug Abuse. He mentioned Nora Volkow, pivotal person in understanding. There's been an absolute increase in mental illness in young people. Absolute increase. Shannon knows this. We see this at Muirwood. Everybody that works in this area sees it, and it's starting to impact on mainstream understanding. I'll just highlight this, Ben, because I'm an adjunct professor at UCSF Medical School. I teach child and adolescent psychiatry. Many of them came out of the era that it's just marijuana. But now what the young psychiatrists and training are saying that there's a comorbid relationship between the early onset of potent forms of marijuana and psychiatric illness. Same model. If you have a psychotic break early, it sensitizes the brain in such a way that you're more likely to have a lifetime prevalence of mental illness. Very dangerous stuff when you're talking about the potential for bankrupting the healthcare delivery system. So the question, of course, is what are the correlations? And there is a direct correlation between the increase of mental illness in young people, the increase of early onset cannabis dependence in young people, and a whole series of other disorders, including depression, anxiety disorders. And I don't want to use my time to go into it in great detail. There's abundant literature on it. We can provide it. But there's evidence that the brain has its own endogenous anti-anxiety chemicals, and the use of potent forms of cannabis suppresses those. A phenomenon in pain management is called hyperalgesia. They found out that chronic use of opiates for non-cancer pain on the long term actually makes the pain worse because it suppresses the endogenous endorphin system. So they're finding out, from a neuroscience point of view, is the chronic use of potent forms of cannabis for anxiety disorders actually alters the brain in such a way that it increases the anxiety disorder on the long term. And I mention this because Ben pointed out, you can have all the opinion you want, but there are criteria in DSM-5. If you meet these criteria, you have cannabis dependence. And in science, what happens is that you have a accepted endpoint, and then you look at the consequences. These are all populations that have met DSM-5 criteria for cannabis dependence. Increased mental illness, early onset psychotic disorders, increase in chronic anxiety, and the thing that's the most alarming to parents, they've also found out that when you meet criteria for cannabis dependence in adolescence, there's a significant decline in cognitive ability and learning ability. That, of course, behaviorally correlates with what the parents see, which is the decreasing grades. But the neuroscientists have come along and found out, and in this developing brain, it actually alters the axon connections in the primitive area of the brain. In other words, they can actually visualize what's happening with the adolescent brain that correlates with DSM-5 criteria with cannabis dependence, that translates into learning disability, and what the parents see is decline in grades and school performance. So again, Ben, I very much appreciate what you've done here. Now, what we do, we work on what's called tertiary prevention, which is treating the cannabis dependent, cannabis problem young person. No disease has ever been treated out of existence. We've got to do more of it. That's not the answer. That's just part of the answer. The second is the secondary prevention, what's happening at the community level for early intervention. And then the bottom of the pyramid is primary prevention, and they put great emphasis in primary prevention and as culprits in the latter part of your lecture, with the highlight on commercialization. That seems to be the most potent force in what's happening now. And then all the concentrates and this, that, and the other. And I see it. We do all the medical services at rock concerts through our rock medicine. And at Outside Lands, we had 82 people, young people, that puked their guts out after eating an edible. And it was a difficult situation because They get their nice dresses here in Marin County. They spend their money for the tickets. They tell their parents that they're going over to friend Sally's house. In fact, they come into Golden Gate Park, get an edible, spend the entire tent vomiting all over their dress. And then secondary prevention is harm reduction. And we found out, for example, you can't get into an Uber while still throwing up. So the idea was they were going to take the Uber home and not tell their parents. Mrs. Jones, your daughter is still here at midnight, and she's so sick that we can't put her in an Uber to take her home, but you come and get her. Mrs. Jones is real unhappy. She didn't know her daughter was there. She had no idea she took an edible. I spent a lot of money for that dress. She threw up all over it. That's secondary prevention. Primary prevention is the bottom of the platform, trying to prevent it all from happening. And I know that's what our next speaker is going to be talking about, the community aspect of it. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith and Ben Cort. I'm Linda Henn. I work with the Coalition Connection, which is working to reduce underage alcohol and drug use, and we are primarily a prevention organization. We also work with harm reduction because it's a realistic scenario in our county. We try to work with elementary, middle, and high school parents and students. We use a lot of environmental prevention, meaning we want to change the conditions that a child or the community is living in so that the whole community benefits. So our coalition is comprised of 12 sectors of the community. We don't believe this is a youth problem, parent problem, or school problem. It's a community problem, and it takes all of us working together. As legalization has come to California, we're all grappling with what that means. It's a very complex topic. And just like we have 19 school districts in Marin County, we have 12 communities that are all looking at this very differently. There are a couple of things they do agree on. They all are allowing, because of law, indoor cultivation for medical and adult use. Up to 6 plants indoor. And they all are allowing delivery of medical, and some are allowing delivery of adult use, even though that's a tough one to monitor. So I would have probably just gone ahead and approved that one. 7 of the towns have already adopted ordinances, and they've decided on all the issues. It's very complex. Nobody in Marin is allowing retail storefront. 5 of the towns still have moratoriums, and they'll be deciding further. They took a wait and see approach, which I think is wise. There's a lot to be learned. As Ben shared about what's going on in Colorado, we have a lot, in Washington and Oregon, we have a lot to learn. And we don't want to make some of the same mistakes that, to me, that they're experiencing, and some of the side effects and some of the harm, especially the increased emergency room visits, the accidental overdoses from edibles, the impact of advertising. Since we mainly deal with youth, Marin County has one of the highest rates of marijuana use in the country. And southern Marin is even more prevalent. And we also have a really, really high rate where we have a low perception of harm. Over 66% of 11th graders do not feel marijuana use is harmful at all. And they also don't believe that you're impaired for driving. So the common thing is that if you're smoking pot only, then you're the designated driver. So there's some, education to be done in the community with both adults, parents, and youth around the true risk that they're putting themselves and others in with the not only the use but the driving. Currently, in all of Marin County, 30% of 11th graders are smoking pot. That's on a regular basis, and 16% of 9th graders. And like I said, the perception of harms, 66% of 11th graders do not feel it's harmful, and 51% of 9th graders. And as you just heard from both Dr. Smith and Ben Cort, that's not accurate. There is harm, and especially to the developing brain. You know, what a 30-year-old decides to do with their spare time when it comes to cannabis use is very different than what a 16-year-old. We like to say in the coalition, in addition to a lot of the education we do to parents, we work with the schools in providing curriculum. But we also say delay, delay, delay. One of our founders, Lori Dubin here, who started Be the Influence, which helps assist parents in changing the norms around the use, because a lot of parents believe it's acceptable. And I don't think it's that they really think it's acceptable. I think it has become so prevalent in our community to use substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs, that when it becomes the norm, it's hard to change the perception. So a lot of the work we're doing in the coalition is changing those perceptions and changing the community norms, and it's hard, and it's a long-term project. But I'm convinced that the facts, the science, the data tells us we have to. You know, even though it's a norm, I don't think we should just ignore it and allow our youth or permit it or just say they're going to do it anyway. I did it as a high schooler, and I won't ask you to show your hands, but a lot of us probably did too. But I didn't know what we know today. And what I was doing back then isn't the same as today. And we just know so much more. Brain science, the functioning MRIs weren't in existence when we were, well, maybe when Ben was young, but not when I was. So we just know. We know facts today. We know science. And I don't think we can be responsible citizens to not do prevention work in our communities. I think I would feel irresponsible if I didn't do this work and I didn't, from what I know. It's just too important, and it's because I care. I'm not a prohibitionist. I'm not, again, I don't honestly care what adults do in their spare time. Again, preferably not while they're driving and not on a recreational basis. That's not the problem. The problem is with the developing brain. I believe kids, students, youth, whatever, they should be given a fair chance and given the most opportunity. So the work we do at the Coalition Connection, primarily in the Redwood and Drake communities, but we work with 10 other organizations throughout Marin County called the Marin Prevention Work that are all working to make the community safer for youth, and whether it's with tobacco, vaping, prescription drugs, anything that can help them. We also believe it's not a punitive thing. It's a restorative process. We all make mistakes, and we don't believe kids should be locked up, suspended, expelled, whatever, for mistakes they do. We have a wonderful, the YMCA Youth Court is a wonderful restorative process. We really believe in helping and working with youth and schools, and I feel like we have a very common sense, logical approach to this problem and to this issue. I won't say it's always a problem, but I think protecting our youth is important.
Do a few minutes of questions if Dr. Smith is well.
Yeah,
There's a question. Someone want to put one?
I'm from Boston, and I'm from Boston, and our recreational dispensaries are coming online next month. And I'm not sure what the question is, but what I didn't expect tonight was to be terrified. Yeah, and I was actually thinking, this might be cool when this happens. I've never been in one. But not just the science, not just the data, but just the visuals of the advertising, and to think that crap is going to be coming in Valpak is just, it's just terrifying. So, you know, right now in my community, Weed Maps, which no one even knows what that is, has billboards all over the communities to soften the market. And those billboards talk about how great things are in Colorado financially, and how crime rates are down, and how kids are unaffected, and they're softening the market. And I guess the question is, you know, in Massachusetts, they don't see this coming. And so what can be done? You know, it's almost like too late. The horses left the barn.
I think that, I think that what can be done is we can recognize that this is not going to be different than any other time we have attempted something like this in the past. And there's something inside of our collective brains that says, oh, this one's going to be different. We're going to nail this. No. Every time you put unfettered capitalism, even maybe worse than that, cronyism and capitalism together, every time you do that in this country, we wind up screwing the little guy. And you have examples like Uruguay and examples like Portugal, and they say, well, why can't we do it like that? Because we're not them. Because we are not a country made up of 5 million Catholics, or we are not a country made up of people who look to the government for absolutely every answer to everything. This is a country that worships the dollar. And so I think what we do is we apply sound logic to this one the same way we have every other one, instead of saying, like, being so hypnotized by the awesomeness of weed that we're like, everything's going to be totally cool. It's weed. Weed's awesome. Everything's going to be great with weed. It's freaking Walmart and Monsanto. That's what it is. And we've learned our lessons about those guys. Those are just my thoughts on it.
And I think the advertising rules and regulations in each state are different. And you may want to check, and I don't know what they are in Massachusetts, but I believe there are regulations. I don't think we're going to see what we see in California. I think there's a lot more regulation around the advertising. At least I hope so. But
you will. The same thing happened to us. We put a lot of these regulations into place, and then thank God for the First Amendment. They got sued out of existence.
My perspective to the response to that question comes out of a public health perspective and a historical perspective. I was president of the American Society of Addiction Medicine when the most evil industry in history, the tobacco industry, was caught lying. Actually, the only time I ever got a letter from a president when our American Society of Addiction Medicine helped expose what's called the tobacco papers, which showed that they were lying. And this was President Clinton. I have a feeling that it's going to take lawsuits. There's a lot of, and this came up at the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Why can we as a society regulate salmonella in lettuce in a grocery store, but we can't regulate the vapes, these things that Ben talked about, the rapid delivery system? That's the only reason they're there. So I hope, I applaud the community action. I applaud Ben for doing what he's doing. But this situation is so potentially destructive. I will take care of young people puking their guts out at a Grateful Dead concert, and I'm proud to work with Muirwood of cannabis-dependent youth. That's what I do. What really gets me is that the marijuana industry has been taken over by the most corrupt, evil industry in history. And the only thing that stopped them was not humanity, not community education, not anything. It was legal action. And I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yes, hi. One of the thing that popped in my head when I was looking at those candy bars with 350 milligrams, I think it was, it's strictly potency. You know, there's kinds of alcohol. I think Everclear is one of them. You know, you take a couple of shots of that, You take too much, it could kill you. It doesn't. Where is regulation in this? It doesn't seem like there's any regulation. There's between what's a safe amount and what's in a candy bar that you could chew in like inside of 2 minutes that could actually really seriously harm you. There's been no effort at regulation with these products. Like in alcohol, wine has, what's 8%, 10%. Some sweet wines have 12%. Your bourbons have a particular alcohol percentage. You don't see a lot of 150 proof alcohol on the shelves, but it looks like you've got the equivalent of 1 or 2 or even 3 times that in marijuana products that look like candy bars. And people associate candy bar with a candy bar. They don't associate it with this life-threatening thing. And so you've got this disconnect between advertisement and the actual product. And this is what, when Prohibition was finally repealed, was because people were killing themselves creating alcohol-like substances out of stuff that just wasn't going to work. And so the good intention was completely obliterated by the result. So aren't there some examples of like what the alcohol industry did in legalization that could be followed by the pot industry?
Man, you raised such a great point with this, and I actually wrote kind of extensively about it. The problem, and one of the big differences is, and the reason why we have so much more Everclear than 3.2 is because we have allowed the rules to basically be written by the people who are selling it. And if California got a little more proactive with an organization called CCAPP, that basically is the treatment providers, and they were a little more proactive in trying to get some things in. But all this legislation comes from places like the Drug Policy Alliance, the Marijuana Policy Project, and you got to remember that laws aren't typically things that are crafted by benevolent politicians. They're crafted by lobbyists who hand them to the benevolent politician and say, somebody should vote on this. And it is in their interest to not have restrictions on potency. The other big issue that you've got with this, so could we do it? Yes. And will we eventually do it? I believe so. But I think exactly what Dr. Smith just said. I think it's going to take lawsuit after lawsuit. The old adage, you let the wolf kill the fox. The trial attorneys will win, but it takes time. And the other real issue is that there is not a common understanding of the variance in THC potency like there is with this. If I say 90 proof, everybody here knows what I'm saying, versus 3.2. If I say 98% THC versus 4% THC, it's kind of here. And then the other component that is a little bit more insidious and harder is actual enforcement. Because having laws on the books and then enforcing those laws, again, it is completely illegal under every circumstance for me to use my credit card to buy marijuana. And I have never bought THC in Colorado using anything other than my credit card. Those examples go on, from billboards to cartoon characters to, because something's on the books, law enforcement's actually really busy. So those are just a couple thoughts on it.
I'd just like to reinforce that. One of the reasons that we present models is you have to decide what model you're going to use. Remember, the alcohol industry didn't self-regulate. They would like to have sold the most potent forms of alcohol. They were forced to regulate through lawsuit, dram shop, interstate commerce. This is the debate. If we keep in the paradigm of legalization versus criminalization, we are not going to deal with the issues that you have. If you move into a regulatory model and they violate it, like the tobacco industry do, if they lie to the consumer, if they lie how much nicotine's in a cigarette, if they lie that it causes lung cancer, and they're regulated, the tobacco industry loses billions of dollars in these lawsuits that many of us testified in, and the alcohol industry was forced to regulate. So are you going to use the criminalization model and just arrest people, well, I think that, Ben pointed out, that train has left the station. The big battle now is the commercialization model and the regulatory model. And the commercialization model doesn't want to do any of the things that you've just stated, but the public health model does. So, anyway.
How much weed, flower, like concentrate, and also like edibles does it take to like OD? And has there been any recorded deaths?
The only deaths that have been reported are the potency where they have had hyperemesis and aspirated their vomitus. That and those are mounting. You do not have the same types of deaths that you have with the direct pharmacological effect of the opiates. You do have some deaths associated with the cannabis psychosis, self-harm, jumping off. And if you look at a coroner's report, they will list causes of death. So the simple answer is yes, there are deaths reported. The complex answer is what caused those deaths. In other words, if you take one of Ben's concentrates and you puke your guts out and you aspirate the vomitus and you die of aspirated vomitus, in the alcohol field, you would call that an alcohol-related death. Why would you not call that a cannabis-related death? And we know that intractable hyperemesis is a big issue. But that, you don't have hyperemesis with your 2%. You have hyperemesis with these very potent forms from particularly the edibles. These 82 young people that were puking their guts out, that we rolled them on their side, make sure they didn't aspirate their vomitus. They ate those things that Ben was talking about. They were passing them around like candy. And they would come up to us and say, I'm on Wellbutrin. Does an edible interact with Wellbutrin? And in medicine, we say you ask that question before you take the edible. So what we're trying to do is move towards young people to be educated about their brains and their lives and all sorts of medication, rather than say, I'm on Wellbutrin for depression, I just ate an edible, what's the interaction between the two? That is not an educated consumer, and that's what leads to a lot of consequences.
Are the effects of marijuana on the underdeveloped brain permanent?
Great question. Yeah, and you need to hear the doctor on this one too. One of the slides that I love to show more than anything, it's a little bit techy and it takes a minute to get into, but basically what it shows is that a lot of the negative stuff is a lot less negative the longer someone has stayed abstinent. So I'm not going to bore you with this, and I'll let forget too much of the science. Addiction reprograms your brain. Chronic use at our age, at this age, your age, when I was a kid, reprograms your brain. But there's this thing that goes on inside of your brain called plasticity. Your brain changes and it heals and it fixes itself, and oh my goodness, no. We get on the right path, man, and this stuff can come back. Like, is there a little bit that I think I lost here? Yeah, I think I did. But at the same time, what I feel like I have gained through the struggles and the clawing and the fighting of getting sober, and through the relationships that I've got with other guys who have done the same thing, that's a good trade for me. Like, you never get too far gone that your brain can't start to bounce back for sure. it's going to be a lot harder because your brain actually, you start to trim stuff instead of grow stuff later on in life. So it would be a lot harder for his brain to bounce back than it would be for your brain. But your brain can bounce back, and the younger you are and the earlier you stop, and no, man, it's this course correct, and it bounces back. So there's ultra layman terms, Dr. Smith.
What Ben has said is accurate with a great deal of neuroscience behind it. And again, as he pointed out, is that everything he says has scientific background. The good news that came out of this conference was neuroplasticity and how the young brain can reprogram itself into the path of recovery. But the important thing that came out of it is it's not just stop using. You have to develop alternative pathways in your brain. That's the recovery path that we've talked about. That's like reprogramming the brain through frequent small rewards, and that builds up the D1 allele and alters the genetic transmission of the brain through epigenetics. So recovery is a very powerful thing and can work. So that the idea that if you become cannabis dependent, your brain is destroyed, which is a prevention technique, I think is counterproductive when you're talking about recovery, because all the evidence is that the best thing a young person, the worst thing that happens with a young person, they start using early. But if they stop early, the best thing they got for them is a young brain. But it's not just stopping using. It is working a recovery pathway to reprogram their brain in the same direction that Ben did. And they've actually got neuroscience to show that the dendrites and axons and everything are reconnecting. It does lead into a situation of what's called arrested maturity. In other words, you can arrest your maturity with the cannabis, and then when you come back, it takes you a while to get where you would be if you hadn't been using it at that early age. But in point, if you keep working, you can achieve the goal. And as I say with the young people, find your bliss and follow your bliss. But it may turn out that you wiped out 5 years of your learning ability, but you still can do it. But it just takes a longer path. And that's why I urge, I know that Shanda and I spoke at the, Shanda's still here? Oh yeah. She and I spoke to the Young People's AA here. 1,400 young people. We couldn't believe it. It was huge. Now, these young people, you have to stay around them because they had the same problems and they made full recovery. But if the parents say, well, my young person, my neighbor, he got early acceptance into Harvard and he never used any drugs, why doesn't that happen to you? Then that really lowers the self-esteem of a young person. Addiction is a disease. The young person had a disease. It is possible for full brain to recover if they stop using and work a full recovery program. And in fact, one of our big initiatives in the American Society of Addiction Medicine was called the American Disabilities Act, which industry cannot discriminate because you had a past disorder. Because remember, all the stuff we're talking about here, stigma is still alive and well out there. And the community not only should try to prevent marijuana, work on the initiatives, but also fight to eliminate stigma for the recovering person. Now, Ben, I didn't elaborate on that, but that was a very powerful first part of your talk, Ben. I took so many notes here I couldn't talk about, but a battle for the rights of recovering people to live a good life by reducing stigma and the things that compromise their recovery.
I think you just, he noted a downside, which was the arrested maturity part. like we're a little less mature. That I see it as a good thing. My three favorite shows being Trailer Park Boys, Archer, and South Park, and I still laugh at bodily functions every bit as hard as my 9-year-old. So put that in the plus category, maybe. Sorry.
Hi, this is coming from somebody who really doesn't have that much experience with like drug use, but I just want to ask, is the solution to like, is there some forms of like marijuana that you should like never touch? So if, like wax or shatter, or is it more about the concentration of how much THC is in there, or how much you actually take? Or there's just some forms that you should just never touch?
Stay away from concentrates, period. Yeah. And the lower the potency, the less problems I'll have with it. But again, so the two things: stay away from concentrates, period. Wait till your brain's fully developed, number 2.
So with like CBD being a non-psychoactive, with all the mental hospitals and stuff, you ever think that there's going to be people focusing on those people, first off, getting the money from those people, so they got the capitalist part, and then they also are helping the people, so it's also for the good. So yeah, that's about, you think that's ever going to happen?
Yeah, capitalism, we live in a capitalist society. If the pharmaceutical companies want to develop CBD for chronic pain as an alternative to opiates, for refractory forms of seizures, for multiple sclerosis, all for it. And young people that are starting to ask those questions know the difference between THC and CBD. So that there's a lot of products coming out with CBD that have tremendous therapeutic value. And remember, I just came from the American Society of Addiction Medicine, which is the Physician Society in the treatment of addiction. And they had a whole session on the potential for CBD as a therapeutic agent. In fact, it's interesting. I really, again, I have so many notes of what Ben was saying, but he really hit on something, that the natural plant has a balance between THC and CBD. Man comes along and alters that balance, so it's high potency THC. You know what some of the new therapeutic trials are going on now? Is a mixture of THC and CBD. In other words, if you say it's a natural plant, well, let's restore it to its natural state and see the therapeutic benefit from it. And that is some of the pharmaceutical research that is both very promising, and it's also appearing into the addiction conferences, because we are looking for products that can treat cannabis dependence. And again, one of the interesting trials, there were some others, but one of the interesting trials was a mixture of a more natural mixture of THC and CBD to interact with and help restore the natural function of the CB receptors.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. So I'm told a movie is going to start in 15 minutes, so we have to end it here. I want to thank Linda Henn, Ben Cort, Dr. David E. Smith,